What is the most effing useless thing that they teach in school? Left brain vs right brain. Not only is it not true, it just divided all the kids from smart kids to art kids. No need for that. Character counts. It was our school's motto. The school also actively punished honesty and integrity when it mattered, and instead held award ceremonies for students who showed basic human decency, like, hey, you dropped this in the hallway, here you go. You would get awards for not being a piece of but if you decide to show any real character, like stepping up for your friends when they're in trouble, you get detention. Let it be known, Erindale Secondary School in Ontario, Canada is a shithole. How to take care of a baby by 1. Bringing in an egg. 2. Having the teacher sign the egg. 3. Decorating, protecting, and carrying the egg at all times for 2 days. 4. Revealing to the teacher at the end of day 2 that the egg was still intact, without cracks. All that taught me was how to take care of an egg. Step 1. Put it in the fridge. Sure, but what about the egg? Ignoring the bully. She will go away, sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt me. That needs to chance. I'm sorry, but if someone is bullying my child on a day-to-day basis, my son has every right to take charge. Zero tolerance policy is the dumbest thing ever taught and implemented. All it teaches is to fear authority when you're the victim. It enables the perpetrator, who is normally a bully. I know administrators are lazy FS, but they need to actually investigate the goddamn problem instead of saying, hey, you both were involved in the issue, so you're both going to get punished. It basically just raises you to hate authority. And while I don't like authorities either, I don't think they're all distrustful. Although, I guess this could be interpreted as commentary on how garbage authority is. It also escalates situations. You're getting the same punishment if you retaliate or not. So you better make sure they think twice before starting with you again. I do not want to say this and strongly advocate against violence, but this unfortunately lead to such conclusion. Indeed, it actually taught me something useful for the real world. You can't trust anyone with power over you. Nobody cares what happens to you. And if you don't want to live on your knees, you have to fight. Damn the consequences. There can be no justice under an absolute law. Not a lesson, but they teach you to respect adults no matter what. That's how teachers get away with so much nonsense. It's how parents get away with abuse. Kids are taught to respect adults, but what they really teach them is don't do anything to inconvenience an adult. So a kid is more likely to keep their mouth shut if they are getting molested or beat. They need to teach instead that respect is earned and not to blindly trust people just because they have seniority or authority over you. That you have a right to make a judgment on somebody if they are doing something bad. 100% agree. This is what makes children think it's their fault when someone is treating them wrong, and it is so incredibly harmful. DARE was the single worst effing useless thing ever taught at school, especially when the cop teaching said class ends up getting arrested for coke. Studies showed DARE increases drug use because 1. When they realized DARE is lying about weed, they assumed DARE is lying about other drugs, and 2. So much emphasis on resisting peer pressure makes kids assume everyone is doing drugs, so they have to do them to fit in. That sticking up for yourself is wrong. I punched a kid in the face because he was being physically abusive to me. He grabbed my arms and spun us in circles, intending to let go once I would be sort of thrown through the air. I got an arm loose and punched him in the face before that happened. Instead of him being expelled, I, a female half his size, was forced to apologize for defending myself. I'm still effing mad. That reminds me of the time when I was being bullied by some older guys in 3rd grade and I was just a small girl. Edit. I use he him now BTW. They threw a basketball at my head once, and so, having enough, I slapped one of them. Teacher claimed to not see the boys throwing 3 basketballs at my head and I got detention for the rest of the week. Got tripped by some bullies in school and literally had my skull crack open on a steel and concrete pillar. It messed me up for life. They never got in trouble. We had written finals in high school for PE. It was so ridiculous that even the PE teachers didn't really bother reading our answers while grading the exams. Example questions. A friend of mine answered describe the history of the football with an elaborate answer about how a guy stuck on an island kicked a coconut and due to a quantum anomaly, his foot fused with the coconut. This led to the birth of the legend of the football. Another friend answered what is an aerobic exercise with a drawing of a man doing push-ups in the presence of a chemistry set creating oxygen via hydrogen peroxide, and drew arrows to them labeling the reaction and the push-ups as aerobic and exercise respectively. Another friend answered a question about things to keep in mind when trying to eat a balanced diet for health with points like try not to eat a brick wall. Only one of them failed. One of them had their final exam sheet framed. I want to hope that it was the aerobic exercise that had failed. It'd be funny for the other two to pass even though the aerobic exercise was probably the closest answer to being correct. It actually was him that failed. Hard to get away with a diagram. The others just passed because nobody bothered to read the answers. That if someone's bullying you, you tell them that you don't like it. Like no that's why they do it. My grandmother used to tell my dad, my brothers, and me if someone hits you, tell them you don't like to get hit. Most useless piece of advice that has been taught to society. My dad taught me to fight back if someone hit me but to accept the punishment from the school. And you know what? People stop hitting you once they realize you punch back. The only thing that ever helped me with bullies at that age was fighting back. I tried everything else, but the teachers punished me more than the bullies for it. They'd always say it doesn't matter who started it, which is effing bullsh. I'm still mad. I was waiting in the office for a counselor's appointment in 9th grade, and this kid that I didn't know decided to lay into me and make fun of absolutely everything about me. I wasn't making eye contact. I just kept shaking my head no and looking at all the office workers, who heard him, but ignored it and said nothing. As soon as I got into my counselor's office, I started sobbing. This kid had absolutely broken me. The counselor was visibly uncomfortable with me crying, and was like, do you want to talk to him? Let's get him in here and talk it out. I was like, no. Why would I want him to know what he did to me? To which the counselor replied, so you two can be buds after this. I was like, yay. Let's let the bully know that his tactics have worked, and I'm even closer to killing myself now than ever, which is why I was going to the counselor's office in the first place. Glad I never have to do high school again because I wouldn't make it out alive a second time. I seriously don't get that. How can school staff legitimately think, hey, this kid's getting bullied? They would certainly make good friends. This plan couldn't F up in any way, so you two can be buds after this. Honestly, school administrators and guidance counselors can be so freaking naive about bullying. No, you're not going to be best friends with your bully because you opened up and told them how much it hurt you. The bully doesn't want to be your friend. He wants to feel superior to you by putting you down. When I was in primary school, we got taught about digital roots. It's where you take a number, add up all the digits and repeat if you have more than one digit. So 684 6 plus 8 plus 4 18 189. Nobody else has ever heard of this. It's useful for a rather niche video game lol. It's useful for determining if a number is divisible by 9. 684 is, because your answer was 9. Divisible by 9. Why would you need to know if a number is divisible by 362,880? Can you run a mile in 7 minutes? WTF no, lol no 4.0 for you. Our elementary school was heavy into unicycles. Gym class year round was learning to ride, then ride together, and in formation. I was one of the unlucky few who never got it. I can't dance or ride a bike either, so I suspect there's some balance issues. School all but threatened to hold me back a year until I learned how. Everyone forgot and never picked it up again as soon as they moved to middle school. Worst part is that we were a very poor school in a very rural area without much funding. I can't imagine how much the school spent on those unicycles. There was no sponsorship, and we weren't competing in anything. In my pay class we learned Nordic pole walking, with a special emphasis on the technique. You know when you see old ladies walking with those ski poles. That was us at age 15. The kicker was that I went to an all-girls school, and they made us do laps around the neighboring all-boys school with our poles. So not only was it useless but also humiliating. Did it keep the teen pregnancy rate down? Imagine being such a lazy effing school administration that you green light walking but with sticks in your pay curriculum. The idea of some small village where everyone rides around on unicycles and has no idea it's not normal feels like something out of a quirky RPG. Mayo. Sorry you had to go through that, it must have been so Kafkaesque. Would make sense in an isolated village. If there's no outside influence, then from one generation of teachers to the next, they'll misguidedly keep forcing each and every student to ride a one-wheeler. It's a dangerous cycle. Abstinence only sex ed. Imagine if driver's ed just told you the only way to avoid an accident is to never drive a car. Both equally useless because A. You can get RED while practicing abstinence, and B. You can still get hit by a car even if you never drive one. I'm from Texas, and in Texas history class we learned way too much about the Battle of the Alamo. Do you remember the Alamo? Apparently he does. Indeed. The only thing I remember from TX history is that there was some AHAT politician named Emma Hogg, but more importantly he had a daughter named Emma. He named his daughter Emma Hogg, and not enough about propane and propane accessories. That the female body will shut down during RE and she won't get pregnant. Thus babies cannot be conceived during RE. Catholic Grammar School, Northern Ireland. Effing useless. Factually and ethically wrong. OMG. I thought this was just some ridiculous drivel a whole politician spout. Makes me wonder if he learned it too. Not exactly something they teach in general, but in my high school music class, we had to memorize our national anthem in a different language. We used to be a colony and it was originally written in the colonizer's language, and then sing it out loud with the same melody and all, except you're parroting a bunch of words that you don't understand. Over a decade later and I still think it was a pointless exercise. What country are you from? Probably from the Philippines. I had that to learn our national anthem in Spanish and in English too in high school. Square dancing. In Scotland we had to do country, Gaelic, dancing in primary school. Not sure the American equivalent. 5-12 years old. At the time everyone hated it cause you'd have boys lined up against one wall, girls lined up against the other, and you had to go over and ask a girl to dance with you, which felt like a marriage proposal at that age. And God forbid if the girl said no. The teachers must have loved it, watching all the kids squirm. Fast forward 10 years and the rest of your life, and every time you go to a wedding that has a Khalid, or just a Khalid, then it's the best thing ever and you'll tell the same story about lining up in the gym hall. Worst part of that, she was my class had exactly 2 more boys than girls, so 2 poor FS had to bear the dreaded title of Gaylords for the rest of the month. Subtext, it was me. I was the Gaylord. I begged my parents to let me call in sick on square dancing days. What a ridiculous and uncomfortable activity. Memorizing the periodic table. It's a table. There is no need to memorize it. All the info is there already. Every single day in chemistry class, there was a huge poster on the wall with a periodic table on it, big enough to read from any seat in the room. Except one day, the one day we had to take a test on how well we'd memorized it. Then they covered it with a sheet. You see, it was absolutely essential we remember the molecular number of molybdenum, for all those hypothetical other times when we wouldn't just be able to look up on the wall and see it. Square dancing. It was put into the curriculum at us schools after heavy lobbying from industrialist Henry Ford. He didn't like the awful, new modern dances people were doing, like the Charleston. I remember when they said we were doing square dancing for a semester. Everyone groaned and beed and said how stupid it was at first. Then by the end of the semester a lot of people were having to hide their enjoyment of it. Plus a lot of those kids wouldn't otherwise get a chance to interact with the opposite sex. We were told that was why we were subjected to it in 8th grade. They were trying to force interaction between the sexes at a critical point of development. Didn't work, but they tried. My old high school decided that PE wasn't important, and instead of having 2 periods where we would be exercising and learning about the human body, they made us take spiritual development. I hated my old high school. Sounds like they took the high part very seriously. To ask to go to the bathroom. I don't know. Can you? I once responded yes, and started to leave. Got in trouble for that one. Every time a teacher said that to me, I was so tempted to say let's find out and just piss everywhere, but I knew it wouldn't end well. I'll chime in from a teacher's perspective. A lot of what I teach is to eventually prepare students for calculus. Yet most of my students will never take that class. So instead of having fun in math and exploring patterns, properties, problem solving and reasoning logic, we have to make students memorize everything since we have too much to teach. Memorize this formula. No, we don't have time to explore how to derive it in any meaningful way. Plug numbers into here. No, we don't have time to figure out what these numbers mean nor their significance in the world. This stuff is useful in the real world. No, we don't have time to actually explore that stuff. Here's a fake real world problem instead. This math revolutionized the world when it was discovered. No, we don't have time to explore why most kids who struggle with math, in my experience, struggle because they don't have a concrete understanding. It's just memorize math facts and learn to plug the correct numbers into the equation. I'm guilty of all of these sins as a teacher, but the job ahead of me really makes it difficult to do fun stuff in math. There's a long list of reasons why students feel school isn't worth it, and I'm with them in many cases. What we can't fail to forget, though, is school is better than no school. At my school we do many things poorly, but poorly done is better than not done at all. So yes, room for improvement, but please don't give up on the school system. The education system in a nutshell. My physics teacher in high school was the first and maybe only person to explain math and science in a way that was useful and worth paying attention to. I went from playing basketball and sleeping in class to a guy has made a living off of emerging tech, once falling in love with math and science. Still not computer scientist smart, but I make do. I taught for a few years. 10 hours to learn music production and a program. Not enough time at all. A lot of, this is cool, but we don't really have time to show how cool. In phys ed they had us take actual written tests a few times sitting on the gym floor. Questions like, where was basketball invented? What are the rules of pickle? Yada yada. Other useless I took a intro to bowling class in college as an elective, and we had to have an actual final written exam with questions like, where was bowling invented? I took bowling in college and it was nothing more than going down to the local lanes a couple times a week to throw some balls, drink some beers, and smoke a whole lot of cigarettes, as you may have deduced. This was more than a few years ago. It's less useless and more actively harmful, but the way drugs education was taught when I was growing up was straight up nonsense. All drugs are bad. Okay, alcohol is also a drug, and it can definitely kill you. But it's also fine for some reason. Don't question it. And weed is just as bad as heroin. All you need to know is that anyone who even looks at a joint is a morally repugnant junkie, and they are destined to have more children than teeth on some council estate, or will rob old ladies to fund their deplorable habit, and that's if you don't straight up die from even being in the same room as weed smoke. The police definitely have your best interests at heart when they arrest you, so you should knock on anyone you know who might be doing drugs, because jail is the better alternative and it's always for your own good. Oh, and don't worry about what happens when you actually try drugs, because even though you might find a glass of wine or an edible is actually pretty great, you're almost certainly going to start to wonder if maybe heroin and meth aren't that bad either. Are they? Can you trust your teachers? WHOF in those? Also, I was led to believe that way more people would offer me drugs that I could just say no to than ever have in my life. Drugs are expensive, y'all. That if we cover our shoulders and legs, boys will stop looking at us. Saudi Arabia must be just full of men who are hyper focused on the task at hand and not looking up weird porn. Wait, they could save a lot of resources by making men wear blindfolds when in mixed company rather than having women draped crown to toe. In my country we do religion. And don't you dare argue with the teacher or ask any questions, cause Jesus is the only answer. Not to chew gum. On a more serious note, that hugging and public displays of affection are bad. Ask me how many times I got detention because of this. Chewing gum is probably not an educational rule, but rather a custodial rule. Those guys don't get paid enough to scape off your nasty chewed up gum. You get people in this thread saying teaching algebra or proofs is useless and simultaneously demanding that schools should teach critical thinking. About a year ago my boss, a 55-year-old very thrifty woman, was sitting at her desk trying to figure out which box of K-cups was the cheapest per cup to buy. Shortly after, a co-worker of mine who was going back to college was complaining about her college algebra course. My boss then starts on a rant about how these math courses are completely useless and proceeds to say, direct quote, "Why do they teach students to solve for X? I've never solved for X in my life. It took 3 grown adults, of which I'm the youngest at 39, 15 minutes to convince her that she had been solving for x when calculating the cost of the K-cups. I feel like some people have hard times abstract real world concepts down to variables. People, I don't need to learn science in school. I'm not a scientist. Also people, I read on the Instafasa pages that vaccines cause super AIDS. My doctor said otherwise. But what does he know? I'm a mother. Holy f, am I sick and tired of all these mothers using their motherhood to tell me how smart and qualified they are. I'm a nurse and a mother. I'm 100% qualified to give expert opinions on why I'm skeptical of the COVID vaccine. First of all, being a mother is literally no better than me being a father. Second of all, being a nurse is not even in the same ballpark as being an infectious disease doctor. So get off your effing horse. My heart goes out to you poem for your sprog with a number of people saying poetry in this thread. I am the wind beneath the trees, the whispers in your ear, the warm and gentle summer's breeze, the voice you long to hear. I am the blue beyond the sky, the shadow shade of night, the softest sparkle in your eye, the morning glare of light. I am the rhymes that ride the tide, the swing, the sound, the beat, the lines that swell and slip and slide, in stanzas, small and sweet. I am the secret silver seams that weave inside your mind. I am the lost and tender dreams you dared to leave behind. I am the coin you cannot earn, the knot you can't untwist, the thing in class you couldn't learn, and so in time dismissed. I am the storm, I am the sea, the unison, the split. I am the you, I am the me, and also full of I don't think what schools teach is useless. They just tend to kind of hide the real point, which is learning how to learn and how to think. The focus shouldn't be history. The focus should be how do you learn history? What they need to do is stop being outdated. Stop making kids write in cursive if you know the world moves toward typing. Stop making kids do math in a particular way when there are usually many ways to solve a problem. Adapt. Bet your teachers to root out political nuts and glorified babysitters. So much to do, but it's gotta be made a priority, and it just isn't. There are likely a wide variety of answers you'd get from this question. But education isn't necessarily meant to provide just a means to an end, i.e., something useful. Education is about broadening our view of the world, teaching us what all is out there, and showing us there is so much more than what we see inside these four walls. Teaching us about what astronauts do on the ice isn't very useful information for many of us, but it's incredibly interesting, and it shows us that there is amazing value in exploration, discovery and further learning. Earth is an ever-changing and beautiful planet, and its inhabitants are even more fascinating and entertaining. We'd likely never know any of this if we didn't study and learn about everything that's here. Yes, some of it is kinda boring, and maybe useless, but it all adds to the depth and breadth of our ability to think critically, and more objectively, about all things. That was my initial thought as well, and I was ready to come into this thread and be outraged by the responses. Then I read Unicycle, and yeah, that's fair. In middle school we had a rule that you couldn't stop at your locker in between classes. Their logic was that you should be prepared with all of your books and stuff for the rest of the day, but my locker was 5 feet from most of my classrooms. I argued that it shouldn't matter as long as you're on time and prepared. My youth left me with a deep disregard for authority that continues to this day. Lol. Pledge of Allegiance was another goofy thing. Seemed like early indoctrination into the cult of us nationalism, but they acted like it was just normal stuff. Needless to say, we quickly found out that you can just sit and stay quiet and they couldn't do anything about it. Lol.